Hey, with that, we are live. Welcome to another edition of Sunday Night AstroLive. And I was thinking of what Dave Chappelle would say in a situation like this, where we are globally, maybe astrologically. I would think Dave Chappelle would come up with something like, "We're in a lot of motherfucking trouble," right? I mean, it feels like things got very heavy. I mean, they were already heavy, but it feels like things got very, very heavy very quickly. Anyway, thanks for being here and being patient. Um, I I fell asleep today. It was like probably about 3:30 in the afternoon, and I thought, yeah, I'll just conk out for about 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes or so. Next thing I know, it's like after 5 o'clock. Well, actually, it was after 5:30. That's how late it was. So I was asleep for about 2 hours today, and I don't have a problem sleeping during the day. Like if I wanted to kick it and take a bit of a nap, I could. For a long time, I couldn't sleep during the day. That was a point of contention. I always used to admire people that could take naps. I was not one of them, but I've gotten a little bit better with it. But today, it just the body just needed rest, and you know, it's really hard sometimes to quantify what we feel and what we feel on a collective level, and what are those things that are contributing to what we feel. I mean, astrology is fairly good at it, especially if a person can articulate what we ascribe to cycles, patterns, um, that are taking place in our lives as it relates to these greater cycles and greater patterns, from the skies, the archetypes, et cetera, et cetera. And so if we can articulate those things in a way that might be able to bring us closer to some sense of understanding, it can help. Clearly, it's a system that I think can help. Some people will look at the Schumann resonance, right? Some people will look at what's happening with the sun to try to quantify what we're feeling. And I think that all those things have a significant degree of importance in our experience. And I also believe that we are interconnected on this plane, and we are, whether we are aware of it or not, exchanging energy. So when there's a cauldron that is being um, heated up and brewed, right? Like it's in the air and people are feeling it. So I feel like that contributes to a lot of the what I call cumulative energy as well. It's the bioenergetic psychic body of our experience here in this plane. And while we shouldn't allow that to get into us and drive our lives, we are connected to it, right? Like we should be able to pull back at times and say, well, this is not mine. And in certain cases, I think that that's really important. This does not belong to me. This is where we get into things like discernment, the individuation of the self. These are all really important things. And there are other times where we're not even paying attention or noticing that we are connected to a much larger field. And there was one experiment, that's been ongoing for a long period of time, and I think it's called, what is it, the human consciousness experiment or something like that. So they've I don't know if they're still doing it, but they were doing it, and essentially they had these meters that were running, like these meters that were connected to some form of environmental biosensor, right? They could pick up on sort of the collective feeling. And then right before 9/11, this thing just dropped like a valley, right? It was like, boom, and then there was nothing. And then after 9/11, it picked back up again, but it happened prior to 9/11, right? It didn't happen when 9/11 happened. So I thought that this was really interesting, that there was a device out there that could, I think it was some sort of Ivy League, maybe Harvard project. I'm sure somebody in chat will figure it out. But what happened was that they had the technology, they were running the technology, and prior to the event, it just cratered, right? And then the event, I think, happened the next day. So it was like probably that night or just before that. And I thought to myself, well, that's interesting because they had this technology that could register in a very imperceptible way. Something was in the air, right? Something was in the mix. So it's not just always the patterns that we're discerning from the inner skies, or it's not just the Schumann resonance, or it's not just the sun itself. Maybe it's an amalgamation of all of them. Maybe that's really what we're dealing with here, and which one influences the other more than the other. Good luck, because once you pull that thread, you're starting to undo a lot of other threads as well. So anyway, I remember, where were we? I guess it was last Sunday night. And I remember just feeling really heavy. And there were a lot of other people that were feeling really heavy last week. You remember I was walking around and I was seeing people, I'm thinking to myself, oh, this person's a walking corpse, right? They're not going to be here. Like that's kind of how I was feeling. I think a lot of us were having that feeling last Sunday night. We were talking about it. And here we are, right? Like here we are a week later, and what is it? What's the phrase? Does correlation equal causation or something like that? That's one of the big fucking like catchphrases now. Maybe, maybe not. But in this case, we were clearly feeling something that we were not comfortable with, right? We were feeling something that was kind of dark and hollowed out and sad. And here we are a week later, like, oh, what the fuck just happened? We could make a case, right? We were on the record. Like we were on the record this last week around, what was going on internally. So here we are, right? We're sitting on the precipice of something rather dramatic. Let's put it that way. First of all, I don't trust anybody when it comes to governments. I don't trust anybody when it comes to operations like what we've seen in southern Israel. Once you go through a very bitter pill to swallow with 9/11 and you start to size everything up, you don't trust a whole lot, right? You don't trust the 9/11 commission. None of it. None of it. None of it ever resolved. None of it ever really laid out. Nope. So then you have to go through a few of these things, right? You have to go through the Boston bombing, Las Vegas, and there's plenty of events that we've all gone through, at least not personally, but as a community, sort of navigating this world and trying to untangle these knots. Right, we've gone through lots of these, and there are always smoking guns, missing pieces, unanswered questions, and what happened on Saturday is no different. No different. So we have a lot of smoking guns, missing pieces, and unanswered questions, some of which we'll try to address tonight as a result of sort of just the facts, right? The facts as we know them. We're going to look at some of those because facts are important. Facts are the thing that is as clear as we know. Facts are bits and pieces of information that give us the ability to make decisions. We have a wide array of decision-making ability. We have intuitive decision-making ability. We have rational decision-making ability. We have the ability to have leaps, right? Cognitive leaps in terms of our decision-making, which is a little bit different than intuitive or instinctual. So we have a lot of different tools at our disposal to make decisions and to come to various renditions of reality, right? So the facts part is an important part. It's not the whole, it's not the sum of everything, but it's an important part. And so there are some facts here that have to be asked. There are some questions, or there are facts that have to be addressed and questions that have to be asked. We're going to go through that tonight in the spirit of inquiry. And since I'm a Scorpio rising, it's kind of what I do. And then we're also going to get into the charts. We have the chart of the actual attack itself. We have Israel's chart. And we have the chart of the 50-year war, the Yom Kippur War, which took place almost to the day 50 years later. So we have a cycle here that's in place. And anyway, that's on the menu tonight. A lot of the material that we'll be going over in these charts will be like the chart of the moment in a lot of ways, because we're just playing with material, especially with the attack chart that's a little over 24 hours old. We might get into the chart of the moment just as a separate kind of, I don't know, augur. We use the word augur. And then we can just sort of forecast, because we're not really looking at moving forward with these other charts. We're actually looking backwards, but with the chart of the moment, we'll have a little forward glance. So there you go. That's on the agenda and the menu. One of the things that can really help you get through the time that we're in is the ability to stay as much as you can in a, I would say, awake and aware kind of neutral space. And one of the things that really helps is to be able to tap into the world of CBD. And my friend Chris over at True Hemp Science has some of the best CBD that you'll experience. And what he's done is he's gone through and figured out a number of different blends and elixirs that are, in his experience, targeted for very specific uses on your body. And you can go through and learn all about his CBD and why it is so effective and how he came to his process. And if you need to actually speak to him, you can do that. You can speak to a CBD expert. You'll make an appointment with him, and he'll sit down with, well, he won't sit down with you, but he'll have a phone call with you or a Zoom or whatever, right? And he'll help you. He'll answer your questions, and you can see all the different products that he has here in the CBD realm, all the different full spectrum oils. He's got the moon dust, which is great. You can add it to a smoothie, add it to a coffee, add it to your own elixir, and it'll clear your brain and then some. He's got spagyrics. He's out of the moon dust gummies for now, but he does have the True Hemp Science sleep gummies. Thumbs up for that right there. These guys are really, really good, right? Here's some more of the sleep gummies. Oh, I guess this is the moon dust gummies. It's got a different. These are the sleep gummies here. And then if you wanted to get in on some of the other gummy action, there you go. By the way, my favorite is the black cherry. So he's got all these different versions and blends of CBD and gummies. And all you got to do, spend $100 or more and type in 15MINS, 15MINS, and you will get some free goodies with your CBD order. And $150 plus get you free shipping, and there's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. Add it to your bug out bag and your bug out box. You won't be sorry. Or just your everyday materials. All right. Let's see what we have here. Who do we got? Cindy Taylor. All my life, I wish I could take naps. I was kind of in the same place. And then a couple of years ago, I kind of forced myself to learn how to take a nap. Mr. Michael Sisternino's in the house. There she is, Susie Gemini. There she is, the lovely and talented Dr. Joan S. Steve Letro, me too, clean up a fallen tree, enjoyed a nap after. Yeah, we were doing stuff around the house here, getting ready for the event. So didn't fall a tree, but definitely napped out. Getting tired of the world chessboard hanging. Let me put that up there. I know, right? I mean, I think this is part of it too. I mean, people are being put through the psychic ringer. I think this is one of the benefits of being a real hardcore, full-blooded Christian, right? If you're a real hardcore, full-blooded Christian, you don't get weary by this stuff. You're just like, bring it on. I don't care. Every day I'm one step closer to my maker, right? And it's every day, and the world could go hell in a handbasket, but you're good. You're fine. No matter what happens, unshakable, unshatterable, and eternal peace be with you. That's one way of doing it. Clearly one way of doing it. But I totally get it hanging. Lynn took 2 naps today. Karen McDonald's here. I had to make myself get out of bed, but stayed here for a long time before doing so. Look at that. See, people are sleeping, man. Catherine Rosen, nice to see you, Catherine. Right back at you. Here we go. Rama Lama. I've been crying on and off all day, feeling the heavy. Yeah, boys and girls, this is not a little border skirmish in Azerbaijan, right? Even though apparently that's part of the deal. We're playing high stakes global poker now. We're sitting at the table with the big boys. Let's see, what else do we have? I predicted this conflict 10 days ago. There you go. Sibylla Delphos on the record. It's okay to thank you, host. I had no choice whatsoever. I posted something on Twitter, and ex-Israel intelligence official said they knew and let it happen. Yes, there is this woman who's an IDF person. Yep. There's too many questions about everything that's happened here. Like, everything that happened would have to have happened in a way where it's all worst case scenario, and with all the variables that would be in play that would have this thing unfold the way that it did. I mean, so the odds for all that to happen are very, very high. They're super steep. So we'll get into some of that tonight. Hanging said I crashed like a dead woman this afternoon. Well, Hanging, you're resurrected. There you go. Peter Bayonne is here. Hi, Peter. Good to see you. Maya Rose. Hey, Maya Rose. What's happening? Israel, 20 guests. Absolutely. There it is. It's interesting. We're going to look at the chart tonight. And had I looked at that chart a week ago, I'd have been on it. But I was processing. It was in my feelings last week. But Sibylla Delphos is right. Absolutely. 100%. Sleep is healing. It says, Kelly and the kids, this is what happens when you have a life. I've had so much going on personally. I better keep up with the world. Thank God for that. That's what happens when you have a life. Let's see. I'm kind of going backwards. Then I'll go forwards here. Let's see. Burgers on the Barbie. Shites cray cray. Oh, I like that. Paula Bizak joins us from Tampa. Hello, Paula. Nellie Drew is here as well. Hello, Nellie. Israel has the best intelligence in the world. Right. And it didn't really work out on Saturday morning, did it? Another strange anomaly. Trish Yamamoto, or Trish Yamamoto, my bad, has a couple of comments here. I was trying to find the first one to connect it to the second one. We're in a 7-year numerology, solitude next year, 8. Year is an 8. Okay. Yes, that's true. We're supposed to understand the esoteric significance of the times we're in. Penny Struthers. Penny is on the money. Look at this. Awfully suspicious that it happens as soon as Ukraine funding might be in danger. Bingo. Bingo. Tom Jordan with a salient insight here. Very strange. 6 hours before the Israel military responded. Yep. All right, let's see what we got going here. Let's go into the future. I was going into the past. Let's go into the future. Looks like JJ's here. What's happening, JJ? He's pink. Glad you got the red. Thank you, Diane. The light changed. Rita Perez here. Hey, Rita. Erica East, Sandra Jack Shaw. Hello, RP. What a shit show. I think this is the first act. We're just getting going here. Let's see. Who else do we have? Beth Berry says she's been sleeping a lot lately. Matt Moon Crazy. Let's see. Who else do we have? Pluto is sucking the air out of the matrix as the direction shifts its dark portals, creating havoc. Let's put that up there, Catherine. Kind of feels that way, doesn't it? Really feels that way. Meow Meow says I got physically sick before the attack. Yikes. That's not good. Russell Gill's here. Hi, Russell. Bodhisattiva's here as well. Damn it, did not get a notification. Well, you know, YouTube is not really good at sending out notifications. Thank you, our Autumn Marlene Eagle Shield. Hey, Marge is here. What's happening, Marge? Good to see you. Kevin Stick Evers, my man, Princeton University. There we go. Thank you. It was that was the project. They're using random 1s and 0s, and they all fell flat right on I think it was the night before 9/11. Let's see who else do we have here. Pluto square node. Yeah, I mean that's true. I was feeling intense energy, palpable, almost intolerable. Yeah. Russell Gill, staged attack. It certainly looks that way, doesn't it? It's so somewhere between supposition and the stars lies the truth. And I think that's what we're going to try to get to tonight. Glenda Davies, last weekend I was exhausted. Yep. Takes a lot to be in this world. A lot. Definitely heavy last week. Yeah, we were definitely dealing with the heavy. So Heather Rue was feeling too, and it's still weird. That's right. I felt a lot of unexplained anger and emotion. I look tan. I don't really tan. I kind of burn. I look a little better now. I don't know, for some reason the light adjusted. Before I was looking like really red. Now I look normal, or I pass for normal. Rita, weird energy day today. Definitely. Ojos. Here we go. Normally I'm feeling all that, but this time around I feel energized. No sugar for a month and 2 inches off my hips. Maybe my progressed sun in Pisces has me in rose-colored escapism. No, I think all those things are important. You know, I think it's important. You know, I remember when COVID hit, man, it was just like a fire alarm went off in my head. And I was really, really on and energized during that whole time. And it feels like we're in a really long version of that. Like it never really, I mean, it ended, but it didn't really end. Because, what, it's really funny. Like when they say, well, you're going to have to wear a mask again. You're going to have to mask up again. And we're starting to see more people wear masks. What does it do to a lot of people? Right? It triggers their trauma. It's like, oh, fuck, here we go again. Right? Just the mere mention of it. Right? It's like, it's sort of sadistic, actually, is what it is. It's a form of sadism. But that takes up people. I mean, when that happens, people get their little trauma switches triggered. What does it do? It takes a lot of fucking energy. A lot of fucking energy to process all that shit that went down and is still ongoing. Funny, I was looking at LeBron James's kid today, Bronny. And the reason I got there is because he has a son younger than Bronny, Bryce, who got a scholarship offer from Ohio State. And I don't know how good the kid is, but having your father be LeBron James doesn't hurt, right? Like, hey, come to our school. Maybe your dad can give our school some money, right? Oh, if he gives us some money, maybe you can play. So I don't know how good Bryce is, but I went into sort of the Bronny pocket, and he had that heart attack. He had a heart attack at practice at USC earlier in the year, where they found he had congenital heart issues. And again, we've talked about this for a long time, that doesn't show up overnight. You have it from birth, right? And that kid has gone through so many different physicals and exams. His father has the best health care a professional athlete can buy, right? And now it just comes up. No, I don't believe the story. But the thing that really got my attention is, like, what's his status? Well, he's going to try and make it back this season. I'm just bringing it up because of what it's theoretically related to, right? So again, look at all the triggers that are in our environment. I think the only way we're going to be able to get through. Now, some of it is predicated upon our experience, what we've gone through, what we've resolved, what we haven't resolved. Right? There's part of that, but another part of this is that we're going to have to figure out how to vibrate above this stuff. Right? That's really going to be our only chance, is to vibrate above it. Not, well, I'm above all this. I mean, I think there is some value in being above, like, petty bickering and shit like that. But it's a different kind of vibrating above it. Like, you're fully conscious and aware of everything that's happening, but the vibrational energies are higher. Like you're humming, and as you hum, you can kind of burn off the dross, right? You can transubstantiate, like, the negative bullshit of the everyday experience. I mean, I think that's where we have to go. So what Ohos was bringing up, I think, is also quite important. Your diet, how your body metabolizes. And for everybody, it's different, right? Some people are vegetarian, some people are, vegan, some people are just carnivores, whatever is going to get you to metabolize better. So you're operating at a higher level of peak efficiency. Got to do it. Got to do it, right? And I know that we all have these moments where we want to crave something. It's, oh man, I just want to feel good. Like, you can have those every now and then, right? But we're playing at a different level now. Unfortunately, there's no more days off, and that's kind of where we are. So why don't we get into it? Let's get into some of these charts. Let me just bring this up here. Somebody brought up sheet, fixed star sheet, which is at 29 Pisces. And the conjunction of Neptune with Sheet. We're going to get into some of that tonight, but not immediately. I wanted to just find Sheet. Somebody asked about that last week. Okay, let's get into the attack. Let's get in. By the way, the thumbnail for tonight's show is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And there's some interesting things around the Al-Aqsa Mosque. All right. So here we go, 6:30 a.m., Jerusalem. This is the attack chart, Saturday, 7th of October. What's interesting is that the time of the attack puts it pretty much at dawn, which reflects the chart of Israel, which is a Libra rising. So it's about as close in some ways as you can get without sort of absolutely mailing this thing in, which would have been a little bit later in terms of the degrees. What are we talking about? Like less than an hour, right? But right here at dawn is when this so-called attack starts. Now, pay attention here because Mercury is in the 12th house, right? So everything that's related to communications, anything at that time in this part of the world, right? Mercury is what we call occulted. It's in the 12th house. There are bits and pieces of information that are not seeable or known to people at this time. And even as we look back on the events, we have to sort of begin here with Mercury in the 12th house. So what is it doing, right? It is in kind of a wide conjunction with Neptune. And we've been talking about that since last week when Mercury in Virgo was in Neptune's. So again, here we've got this, strange kind of fog. Remember last week I was talking about the fog of war? I was talking about the fog of war. And clearly there is some level of communication, information, and data that is not adding up here, right? Something is not adding up. And we have all these yachts. And I remember we were talking about Wednesday. And, these yachts are still kind of a byproduct, or yachts and these in conjunction are still kind of a byproduct of where the planets were on Wednesday. And I just kept looking at all these yachts and these in conjuncts. And it was really startling. Like really, really startling because, when you have all these luminaries, all these objects, and they're at these 150-degree angles, they're very hard to correlate, right? Like one or two yachts or one or two inconjuncts, or also known as a quincunx, you can kind of like feel into the influence. You can see it, like, okay, this makes sense, right? Here's the back end of this, but it's not clearly connected. You're dealing with signs that generally have nothing to do with each other. So it's almost like a shotgun marriage. One or two, you can kind of nav through. But when you have all of these in conjunction, it's like I would, if I was having a kid, I would not want to have a kid born during this time because it would be a very, very complex child and a very complex person. But from a mundane perspective, what do these yachts really represent? They're like these connectors that aren't clearly visible. That's how they work. The connectors that aren't clearly visible. Is, the influence of, we'll play with another yacht game here. The influence of Mercury with Saturn, right? Saturn being hierarchies, Saturn being things like, I don't know, generals, prime ministers. I mean, that's the role Saturn plays, right? And so here we have Mercury in conjunct with Saturn. There's clearly an inability to communicate, or if not an inability to communicate, there's something that's gone awry in a way where the message is clearly not being heard, or maybe not being delivered at all. Right? Who was it? Somebody's chat said was it Tom or Peter? 6 hours before they sent the IDF soldiers in. 6 hours? Are you kidding me? Right? It's almost like it almost feels a little like Pearl Harbor in some ways. The delayed response. I mean, I don't have the Pearl Harbor chart in front of me, but it'd be interesting to see what was going on with Mercury, and if there was an inconjunct, and the ability to deliver the information to the right people in positions of power, which would be Saturn, in order to make fast, incredible, and responsive decisions. Wasn't happening. I mean, that's just one example of, like, Yod's on fire here, or in conjuncts on fire. This is just one example. There's plenty. And I just remember last week looking at all this and just kind of, this is, the energy sucks. Now, Yods aren't bad. If you have one in your chart and you got some inconjuncts, they're not bad. You're just trying to understand things in a way that aren't clearly at your level of conscious comprehension. If you've lived a while and you've done some personal excavating, you can do that. You can kind of put the inconjunct model up and say, you know what, that fits, that feels right. Then you have to kind of walk it over, like you have to walk the back end of the inconjunct over, so that you can integrate these two seemingly disparate influences. And I've talked about Jung, and it's this whole idea of individuation. In fact, the whole chart is based on individuation. Right? That when you understand its wholeness, whether it's through its positive attributes, or its malefics, or the harmonics, or the dissonance, the whole idea is to individuate all of it, right? To be a whole human being. So this chart is a difficult one for that purpose alone. For this event, I mean, I mean, this is just completely squared up, opposed, scrambled. There's so much going on just with this chart alone. Now you throw it into Israel's territory, right? I wish I could get rid of the transits, but I feel like Mercury is playing a really significant role. The opposite with Neptune, the inability to communicate, and then even the odd to Saturn. There's no communication to the leadership, theoretically, and that's for that 6 hour period. What else? We've got Pluto. There's that square, that Mars square, and we're not even. I mean, we're coming up, I think, today, right? I think we have the Mars Pluto square, if I'm not mistaken. Really, really kicks in on Monday. And I've been looking at that Mars Pluto square and saying, that is not a great square. That is really not a great square. And now there's this, kind of feeling of bloodlust in the air. I think it's going to be fascinating to take the temperature on whose side people are on during this whole thing. I just ran across an article that Kylie Jenner, who has 400 million Instagram followers, wrap your head around that. She has 400 million Instagram followers. There are 500 million people theoretically in this world that follow Kylie Jenner. It's mind-blowing. They're following her for beauty tips and who else the fuck knows what. But she had a Instagram post where she was backing Israel. She got so much heat and so much blowback for that she had to take the post down. Now, you know, in this country, on a political level, you know who's just going to step right up and bang the old war drum for our friends in the Middle East. You'll have Mike Pence right out there. You'll have Nikki Haley right out there. She'll be right out there. Uh, Ben Shapiro will be right out there. Like all the neocons. This is the neocons' wet dream, right? This is the Zionist wet dream. And this is part of what we have to look at. This is part of this chart, like the Neptune opposition, the in conjunct with Saturn, right? And there's a lot more going on here too. Like look at Mars. We got Mars just coming off that south node. What's it doing? It's in opposition with Eris, right? So we have discord. We have the true node conjunct Eris, which we were talking about last week. And look what happened. Discord. Again, theoretically, everything that went down is kind of a perfect storm, right? That would be very Eris-like. Very, very Eris-like. But, with Mars squaring off against Pluto, there's going to be the cry for war. These are war drums. And you're going to find that there are people who are, this is going to be very interesting for so-called patriots to deal with. Because you're going to find that there are people who are in the MAGA camp, the Patriot camp, and they're Israel first. They drink the Kool-Aid, right? They totally drink the Kool-Aid. They drink the Trump Kool-Aid. Trump is, saying everything that a presidential hopeful and wannabe would say in a time like this, based on this. And we all know that Trump has had a very special relationship with Israel too. The 2-cent shekel with his face on it. And on the other side, Cyrus the Great. They named a train station after him right by an airport. I think it was in Tel Aviv or just outside of Tel Aviv, if I'm not mistaken. Could be a different city, but they named a train station after him, right? And he was the guy that moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and basically recognizing Jerusalem. And this whole thing being connected to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is part of the thumbnail. And then the third temple, right? The third temple plays a role in all of this. And that the idea is that mosque would be destroyed. And then after they destroy the mosque, they would rebuild it, and it would be the third temple. And I talked about the red heifers months ago and how they brought half a dozen red heifers to Israel. And I think it's about 6 or 7 months ago. And that the slaughter of one of the heifers would be the consecration for the building of the new temple. They wouldn't slaughter the red heifer before the temple. They would slaughter it afterwards. And then what they do is that they would then save some of the blood of the slaughtered red heifer, and then they would burn the heifer, right? They would incinerate the heifer, and then they would mix the ash with the blood, and then it would be used in a ritualistic fashion, part of the facade for the new temple, right? That's the ritual here. So I would assume that those red heifers are still in Israel, but the whole idea here is ultimately to resurrect the third temple. And in order to do that, you have to take down the Al-Aqsa Mosque. When you see people like Trump and Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott and Barack Obama, you name it, and they go to Israel, they go to the wall, right? And on the other side of that wall is the Al-Aqsa Temple, right? It is theoretically where the three great religions all come together, the three great Abrahamic religions. But it's really one of the most important, I think it's the third most important mosque in the Arabic world. And Everything's on the table now, right? Everything is on the table. So if you have an all-out war in this region, and we can begin to um, visualize what that might look like. I mean, they theoretically, I mean, they could get away with just about anything here, right? Like they 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 could bomb the temple themselves, and and blame it on the Arabs, or yeah. I mean, there's so many different ways that this thing could. Oh well, the Arabs did it. The Muslims did it because they wanted global sympathy. There's a lot more going on here too than just what happened in Israel. So one of the things that has come up is that there's a rumor that the arms that were left behind in Afghanistan, a number of them were used in this attack. Does that surprise you? We've also been sending a shit ton of arms to Ukraine, right? Shit ton of arms to Ukraine. And what's happened to them? A lot of them have been sold in the black market for the last year roughly, right? So here we have Mars in conjunct Neptune. We're again yachting off here with Venus and Mars sextile. Can't we all just get along? Can't we all just get along? And oh no, no. So we're just going to take one yacht at a time. Broken treaties. To me, this is Venus with broken treaties. Neptune in conjunct Venus, right? Broken treaty. Venus in conjunct Pluto. These are relationships that are pitted in a life and death struggle against each other, right? That's what it feels like. And Venus is right there, just getting ready to crest on Regulus, 2 degrees away. And then that Mars in conjunct with Neptune, where did they get the weapons from, right? I mean, that's another component with the in conjunct. Where do they get the weapons from? How is it all coordinated? When you begin to read the details of the attacks, it's like, where did they get all those rockets, right? And how are they supposed to get past Israel's greatest defense weapon of all time called Iron Dome, which is supposed to be able to shut down the rampant, again, more questions. Mars in conjunct Neptune. What we can see, though, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is the Mars-Pluto square. And that's coming. And it's going to peak probably, 2754 tomorrow. This Mars-Pluto square peaks tomorrow. So what you want to watch out for Israel's already declared war, right? They have declared war on Gaza and Palestine. And you just watch how many people are going to have bloodlust. And they're going to say, finish it off, turn it into glass, right? They don't understand that there is a much bigger geopolitical game going on here. We can see, and it was a great comment from chat, that the appetite for feeding Ukraine all this money is starting to wane, right? It's like the war just keeps going on and on and on and on. And look, whatever you think of crony capitalism and politics, there are people there who are not dumb. They're not, there are some people who are dumb, but even the guy that pulled the fire alarm, he's not dumb. Pulling a fire alarm doesn't define you as dumb. You're just being manipulative. That's all you're doing, right? So there are some people who are less bright than others, but they're not dumb. They understand what's going on. They understand where the war is. They understand that they have to, in some ways, be careful, especially early on in the war, because you could come out and you could lose your constituency. People are that manipulated. They're that manipulated. People aren't always ready for the truth. Unless you have the ability to reach a lot of people or articulate it in a way that is clear, concise. You can bring history, case study, facts, everything to the table, and do it in a way where it's not just being pedantic or analytical, but engaging. And very few people can really do that. Very few people have the ability to be that comprehensive and that articulate and moving at the same time so that they can come out with the truth, so that they can lay the facts out on the table the way it is. And then not only that, but they have to have a radiant heat shield to take the heat. You got to have all that. If you're going to be ahead of the curve and you know what's going on and it's bullshit, and you're going to call bullshit on it, and you're in a position in this country politically, you better be damn good, because if you're not, you'll lose your constituency. They'll vote you out, or somebody in your district will figure out a way to gerrymander you or whatever, right? They'll redraw the lines, and next thing you know, you're fucked. You're Cynthia McKinney, right? Clearly a classic example. And again, somebody who's been very outspoken towards Israel, didn't really help her, right? She didn't kiss the ring. So this is what I'm talking about, right? So there are people pretty early on, once they got the intel, they pretty much knew that this Ukraine thing was gonna cost us, right? And I think at a certain point, you have, if you're somebody who's a representative, you have to wait for the tide to turn. And it felt like people were getting Ukraine fatigue, and we're reaching this kind of peak. Well, not really a peak. We'll see how far it go. But a lot of people are having a very hard time making ends meet. I bought a box of these protein bars from Costco, and it's embarrassing. They taste good, right? Zero sugar. They're really great, these protein bars. The wrapper is like that long, and the actual bar itself is like that big. And you go through half the wrapper to find the fucking bar. And I remember when they were bigger than that. It's like, fuck it. We'll keep the wrapper the same size. We'll just make the bar smaller. And we've been seeing this across the board. Like we get the ice cream that's sugar-free ice cream, like keto ice cream. Yeah, they raise the price, they keep the same container, but the ice cream's lower, right? So they're going to save money across the board without breaking people. Are you up here? You ready to come in? So anyway, this is part of, again, where we are, right? We're in a very intense time. And getting back to the Ukraine piece, and the reason I brought all that up has to do with money, right? And people having a harder time making ends meet. And that's kind of dovetailing with, well, we're spending all this money, and you just keep asking for more money and more money. And, the short man's wife was spotted at Cartier in New York buying $1 million necklace, right? That shit gets out. His wife, when he was here last, begging for more money, was in New York at Cartier's buying $1 million necklace. Yeah, you should probably tell her not to do that. Come on. Let's go. Come on. The Astrocat's back. Yes, people have been waiting for you. There he is. The man. The myth. The Astrocat. Want to go over to your seat? There you go. All right. Bring your best work. Bring your A game tonight. I need your A game. You're going to come back over here. All right. He's funny. He's a cat. He's like, you can put a dog in their little doggy bed, and they're like, oh, gee, thank you. You can't do that to a cat. Cat says, I'll get to my fucking spot when I'm ready. Okay? Not before. Not anytime before. So the Ukraine comment was very spot on. Really, and here we go now. Now, the Ukraine stuff, and I can tell you some things that I've read, that apparently there were Ukrainian troops in the Sudan dealing with the Wagner group, who supposedly is still there. I mean, I read this. Again, ladies and gentlemen, fog of war, right? The other thing, too, is the Turks attacked the American installation of the one kind of oil refining facility in northern Syria This was just last week, right? Just last week. Again, now we're dealing with Neptune again. Mercury-Neptune opposition. Right? Did you know that? Were you aware of that? And what's interesting is that Assad had just been in China about a week before that, right? Assad, China's bringing Assad over. His wife is there, his kids. That dude has gone through some shit, right? With his country. He's born on 9/11, by the way. He's gone through some shit. Do you think the United States would bring Assad? Like, why can't, hey, let's broker a peace. Let's broker a peace. No, that's never going to happen. They'd never bring him here. Then you have Iran in the mix. Biden just gave Iran $6 billion. Just cleared $6 billion. What do you think Iran's going to do with that? Are they all just shucking and jiving and grinning? Is that what's happening? So there's a lot going on here, just in general, right? There's things that we can't always connect the dots with, but we're going to try our best tonight in order to do some of it. Look at the moon. The moon is in Cancer at 20 degrees here on the chart, right there. And we've got the square with Chiron, and we have the square with Mars, and coming back on the other side, approaching the square is the sun. So the moon itself is stressed, and there's conflict. And we have the moon, which opposes Pluto. And as we go through the day, right, that moon gets into a tighter opposition with Pluto. And this is where people's safety and sanctity are threatened. The moon in Cancer is supposedly all about safety and security and nurturing and loyalty and, and mom and home and, shepherd's pie or whatever, right? It's all, moon in Cancer. It's also intuitive. There's also a very highly intuitive component here. And, I wonder where people were in their consciousness hours before this happened, right? I mean, hours. We're talking like that night. Were people restless? Were they unable to sleep? Were they able to have some degree of deeper insight on a psychic level with that trine with Neptune? Because this is a restless moon. I'm telling you that right now. At Mars moon square, at Chiron moon square, this is the type of moon that will keep you up at night, right? With these squares going on, and that was happening too. And again, it's a threat. Mars here is a bloody threat to security. This Mars in Libra has been really kind of fucked up and intense, really fucked up and intense. And we've seen so many iterations of it. We've seen the infighting inside of the quote unquote truther movement or the patriot world. You don't see too much on the left, which we've gone into in great detail before, but you've definitely seen it here. Definitely seen it here. Let's check out the Sabian symbol for 27 Libra. Let's look at that. Let's see what we've got. All right, we're looking at 27 Libra, which is in the Via Combust or the burning path. And let's see what we have here. It's an interesting symbol. Let's use this symbol as something that could be endemic of perhaps understanding this from a higher position. Let's try that. A lot of times when I do the Sabian symbols, I don't look at them ahead of time. I like the synchronicity of the connection of the moment. So 27 Libra, an airplane sails high in the clear sky, a consciousness able to transcend the conflicts and pressure of the personal life. That's what we were talking about earlier on in the show, right? To get above this thing, if you want to use the word transcend or transmutate, right? So this is a very interesting symbol. Let's keep going here. This picture symbolizes the capacity latent in every individual to contemplate the stress of existence in our world of duality from a higher level. Through the use of his mind, backed by the true efforts and struggles of past generations, and the cooperation of other men, the individual can gain a new perspective on human problems and reach freedom and peace in a supernal realm of being. This second stage symbol contrasts with the first. Well, the first dealt with cooperation between polarized energies. This one introduces us to the realm of unity beyond polarity. It is a stage of transcendent realization. That's really interesting because that's what we were talking about. Like, how do we get through a time like this, right? How do we rise above it? And there we are. So this could be a really interesting launching point, right? A point of departure. Pardon the pun, but it's true. It could be an interesting point of departure. And maybe this is an exercise that you want to engage in, or maybe this is a question you want to ask yourself. How do I transcend the affairs of the world? How do I vibrate above the deeply polarized energies that are willing to just suck people in, right? You've got these giant mouths sort of on the left and the right, right? They're just like sitting there, think of like Venus flytraps. They're just, but they're bigger and they're there to just consume like your psychic and emotional energy, right? Just because that's what's going on. And what you want to do is you want to be up here, right? You don't want to get close to this shit. And I think so this is an interesting question. So by knowing about the events, and I know where I stand on this, but by knowing about these events, deconstructing the events, using things like astrology in order to help us better understand them, does it also help us transcend them? Right? Or does it take us deeper into the dark machinations, right? Does it take us deeper into those places? Being a Scorpio rising, I like to deconstruct this stuff, right? I like to get it up, get it out, go through it, and then see if we can get above it, right? It's been a very healthy practice for me. Everybody's different, but it's been a healthy practice for me. So this is what that symbol is talking about, right? This is what 27 Libra is talking about. It's the plane that's able to get above and look down on what's happening below. It makes sense to me, right? So we're using Mars as kind of a trigger in this regard because it's actually triggering our awareness, right? It's triggering our awareness around these events. And there it is. Mars 27 Libra. Interesting stuff. But again, just look at all this. There's, we could go on and on. The Venus Uranus square, swift, sudden, right? Saturn Uranus square coming in. That's been going on for a while, right? But again, these things, treaties broken, and yeah, I feel like the real the people who are going to have the brunt of this, right, is the Palestinian people. Not every Palestinian person is behind Hamas, right? There's this weird connection with Hamas and the Israeli government, right? And there seems to be a segment who believe that Hamas is the Israeli government, right? That they are infiltrated, that they don't have the interests of the Palestinian people at heart. And then you have Hezbollah. So I think there are a lot of Palestinian people who have a form of leader. It's kind of like being in the United States and having the Republican Party being the party that theoretically represents your values, right? Which would be more conservative and kind of leaning back into this idea of being constitutional, right? And then we have to deal with these people. And even Democrats. I mean, I'm sure that there are, Kennedy-style Democrats who look at the Democratic Party today and they just shake their head, right? So a lot of times we're held hostage by our own leadership. So I think that's part of, that's part of this, right? The other part of it too is that there are Israelis, and this is something I have to tell myself, right? Like there are Israelis that are not down with the plan. They're not down with Netanyahu. And I'm not even talking about, the hardcore Orthodox Jews who are not really in the same boat as like the Zionists. They don't share the similar sort of belief patterns. But there are everyday people, in Israel who are like, no, I'm not down with this. I'm not down with, and this is a country that was right out in front of everything or everyone when it came to COVID response. Their lockdown strategy was brutal, right? So if you were kind of on the fence with your government during that time, you would have been knocked off the fence. So you have these two groups of people inside this country, one who, I guess they're both, kind of being held hostage by their so-called leadership, right? Those are the people that I feel sorry for, because those people are going to be caught in the middle of this crossfire. And some of the crossfire, even looking at this chart, it's like really just hard to look at with all this crossfire, the oppositions, and all the odds that are taking. This chart is pure chaos, if you ask me. It's pure chaos. And you throw Uranus in the mix, and the breaking of bonds and the breaking of treaties. And it also feels to me like this is not just for that attack, but this is a pattern for the world now. I mean, that this is we're waiting for like the next domino chip to fall. We're going to see the dominoes fall. We're going to start to see them fall. We had kind of an alert that the naval fleet is on its way to the Middle East, right? Like all the Iranians have to do is shut down the Straits of Hormuz. We're fucked. We're fucked, right? That would be a complete act of war because you can't get the vaunted petroleum out, right? Which comes from Saudi Arabia, won't come out. So that's all they have to do is shut that down, and they could grind the world to a halt. And what that would do is it would precipitate even, we'd get to the doomsday clock by another couple of milliseconds. So we're going to see the dominoes fall here. And is this thing going to go down like World War III? It certainly has the markings of it, right? Like there's so many vested parties involved. Like you just think it's Hamas, and no, it's not. It's not at all. There have been rumors of like this ongoing conflict with Armenia and Azerbaijan, and how the IDF has gone into Azerbaijan and armed the Azerbaijanis, right? Not the IDF, I'm sorry, the Mossad. So there's all this crazy shit going on geopolitically at the time. And there are things happening that we are not fully aware of, right? And this is, again, getting back to Mercury in the 12th house and that opposition with Neptune and the fog of war. So there's your chart here for the night of the attacks. It's a terrible chart. But we saw this chart coming, right? We felt it ahead of time. And I tell you, man, if I had seen Israel's chart the week before, I'm just getting on record. You would have seen, in fact, why don't we do this? Why don't we take a look at Israel's chart now, since we're on the topic? So Israel attained nation status, recognized by the United Nations, and most importantly, the United States. That took place on May 14th at 4 p.m., Tel Aviv, Israel. And as a result, they are a Libra rising chart. So what was talked about in chat, if we back Mars up right there at 24 degrees on the morning of the attack, it's right there. It is right there. And then there's that south node. And one of the things I've been talking about earlier in the week is grudges. Now, even though I said that there are Palestinians who are being represented by Hamas who are not into it, it doesn't mean that they don't have some ill will towards Israel. The two are not mutually exclusive, right? They may not like Hamas, but they may not like Israel even more, right? So that's part of this. And we talked about this grudge energy that was floating around in the air. And of course, happens with this is interesting too, right? Like it happened, just as Kevin McCarthy was about to be deposed. May 14th, that's right around Matt Gaetz's birthday. Do you guys know that? Let's see. Just want to make sure I got it right. Where is he? Matt Gaetz. Where's this Wikipedia page? May 7th. So a week ahead. Matt Gaetz is a Taurus, if you haven't noticed. Okay. But yeah, the grudge energy. Now, check it out. Now we have a House of Representatives without a leader, and we have naval ships steaming towards the Middle East. Oh, isn't that interesting? Isn't the timing around that interesting? Now, I've read some stuff where this so-called attack had been planned for quite a while. And I don't necessarily think that it precludes a lot of, how would I say this, inside knowledge, or not inside baseball, but more like inside knowledge or people that are just like 9/11. A lot went into planning 9/11. They just didn't wake up, about a month before. Let's go fly those planes. Let's go fly those planes into those two buildings. No, that was being planned for a very long time, right? And when you get into 9/11, of course, you get into the slippery slope of who did it, how it happened, all the stuff, right? And when you begin to put the pieces together, it certainly seems a lot like an inside job, right? And there are certain things that have had to have happened. The most prominent being that Larry Silverstein's purchase of the building happened just prior in August. He finished the sale in August. And then a little over a month later, no time is wasted. And soon he's collecting on those two buildings, plus the third, building 7, right? And so you can start to see things like, wow, gee, isn't that interesting? Isn't it interesting that his brother-in-law, who was in a bidding war for, the entire complex, right? Twin Towers, Building 7, everything that was associated with it. And then just shortly before the deal closes, his brother pulls out. And then right after that, his brother dies. Brother-in-law dies. I mean, like, you're looking at this guy, what the fuck? His brother-in-law who didn't like him, they're in a bidding war for this. The brother-in-law pulls out, brother-in-law dies. Larry Silverstein gets the building. Less than a month later, this guy had been going to the World Trade Center for what, about a month, maybe? He'd go to Windows on the World and have breakfast. And then just on the day of the event, his wife makes him some kind of doctor's appointment. Doesn't show up in Windows of the World for breakfast that day. Right? So you begin to look at these things. You go, oh, okay, there's a lot more going on there. And I'm not going to turn this into a 9/11 show, right? But you can see that just by putting those pieces together, it seems like there was a lot more going on, right? That somebody was a point person for all of this. And anything that was going to be competition for that point person in the acquisition of the building was going to be eliminated. That's exactly what happened to his brother-in-law. And he just so happened not to be there. I mean, so these two things they go hand in glove, right? So we could look at an event like what happened on Saturday morning as a planned event, like totally planned. And at the same time, as we go through this checklist of things that could have or should have happened, but didn't, it starts to fall into a very different category. And it starts to fall into what we would call a false flag category, right? And even with Neptune, to me, the Neptunian piece in opposition with Mercury, that's the one. That is the one aspect of the chart. And then you have the yin conjunction, which we already talked about. All right, let's talk about Israel's chart. So on that night, Mars was right here, bang on, right? Just bang on. I remember when Naftali Bennett was, for a brief period of time, playing Netanyahu's role. And he must have lasted, I don't know, maybe about a year and a half or something like that. And then there was another guy, and then miraculously, Netanyahu, the Libra, he's a Libra, comes back. Like, you can't get rid of the guy. He's like mold. But I remember thinking that if Naftali Bennett was going to continue to be the prime minister of Israel, that on his watch, he would lead Israel into its destruction. And the astrological transit that I used for that was Uranus. And I think Bennett, I think he might have been a Taurus or a Capricorn. Former Prime Minister of Israel. He was Prime Minister for a year, a little over a year. And March 25th, Aries. My bad. And I really thought that he was going to be the guy that would, because of what was going on with Aries and Chiron, that he was going to be the guy, but he's not there anymore. But here we have Uranus, right? Uranus is conjuncting the sun in Israel's 8th house. And I've always remarked about this sun. And it's also conjunct Algol. You know what's interesting about that conjunction is that you can't, like, we've gotten to this point now where in this country, and I know for a fact that DeSantis did it in Florida, but I think Trump even did something when he was president, like, you could not criticize Israel. You couldn't criticize Israel. You couldn't accuse them of being an apartheid state, or, you couldn't do any of that. And even somebody like Jonathan Greenblatt from the ADL was very clear about that. And that criticizing Israel, they're connecting the links and saying, well, if you criticize Israel, you're anti-Semitic. But that's been the trope that they've laid out and have been laying out, right? Like everything that we've been through for like the last 4 years, 5 years, 6 years gets connected in that way. So now, like you can see this with the Sun here conjunct Algol. Like you can't talk about this country. Right? You can't talk about it. You can't criticize the United States 6 ways to Sunday or whatever, right? But you can't do that here. And this conjunction with Algol, what's also really interesting is that Israel's sun is right on top of Trump's chart, right on top, right? So it leads me to believe that there's probably a chance that he'll be reelected again. Or he'll be reelected. That's what I think. And the last time he got elected, Sheldon Adelson, who was this huge supporter of Trump, bailed his ass out, gave him all kinds of campaign money. Trump promised, you are going to take that American embassy and move it from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And all these other presidents wouldn't do it. They just kicked the can down the road, kicked the can down the road, kicked the can down the road. And Trump did. Hence his 2 shekel coin, right? So the Israeli sun is right on top of Trump's midheaven, where he also has Algol. But I think it's fascinating given the fact that, there is a larger kind of growing sentiment in a particular camp that you cannot talk critically about this. Now, try now. This is going to be a very, very interesting debate, right? Very interesting debate where you have Uranus conjuncting their sun, which is conjunct out. When the Uranus will retrograde, will come back again. But what's going to happen here? What is going to happen here? I don't think it's anything good, especially with Uranus. I don't think it's anything good. And I could see World War III coming out of this. Because for whatever reason, whether it was kind of moving McCarthy out, basically the Americans saying, no, we don't have any appetite for this. We're done sending them money, right? Finally, fuck. Now we've got a bigger cause and a bigger war, which somebody pointed out in chat, and that's absolutely right. It's absolutely correct. But once you get into this area, right, you're getting into an area that's really tricky, really, really tricky. And, I have to be careful what I say, by the way. But would there be casualties of war, right, who were citizens? And let's be honest, right? If you're Gaza, it's not a 2-state solution. You're a fucking citizen of Israel. So we don't want to leave them out of the mix, right? But if you're a Jewish citizen of Israel, and you happen to be collateral damage on the way to a war, don't think your collateral damage wouldn't be used to propagate a war. That's what I'm talking about, right? Like movements love martyrs. I don't care if they're on the left or the right. Movements love martyrs. So if somebody is martyred here, in this process, now all of a sudden they have a face attached to a movement. They have a face attached to a reaction, right? So I would be on your, you live over there, be on your toes. Be on your toes. I mean, because we all like to think that governments have our best interest at heart, right? But they don't. They really, really, some governments kind of do, but they really don't. Like the people that had their, believe it or not, like Gaddafi from Libya had the best interest of his people. He's gone. He's gone. The Shah of Iran, he was He was taking it all in. He was all gassed up. He's like, yeah, we're doing great. We want a little more. We're going to rebuild fucking Persia here. We're going to rebuild Persepolis. And by the way, we want our oil back, right? Dude, you're gone. But, treated his people pretty well, actually very well. Saddam Hussein, for all the bad publicity, women were treated pretty well under Saddam Hussein. They have more rights than they did in a theocratic state. And he was kind of Gaddafi soft in, how he dealt with his people and some of the opportunities. So it's not like there haven't been reasonable leaders in the world, people who might have actually loved their people, took care of them. But by and large, they don't. They don't. And a lot of lip service has been paid to the fact that they do. Now, with Israel, you're dealing with a very nationalistic country, right? One basically, I mean, there's other religions there, but Judaism, for all intents and purposes, it's the state religion, unless, of course, you're a godless Zionist like Benjamin Netanyahu, in which case there's a whole different side, right? So there's that. But you theoretically, it's almost as theocratic and nationalistic in its approach as Saudi Arabia is. Only the rules are different for the different religions and different people, right? Like it's a very interesting entity in that it is guided theoretically by its religion, its sense of destiny, all that other stuff, and it's still a government, right? Like there aren't a lot of those in the world. So you get this with Israel, and at the same time, right, you also have people there, and what's really interesting too is that when you have like a crime family, an organized crime family, you have this first generation of people that essentially are using everything that they can in order to get a foothold in a country, right? We've seen it here in the United States a number of occasions. When Israel started off, they had a gang, right? They had basically these revolutionary units, and they were like bombing the King David Hotel. I mean, it was David Ben Gurion and all these people, right? So you have this, first wave. I mean, Leon Uris even wrote a fucking book about it. You have this first wave of people that come in, and then the successive generations move further down the line from this kind of very vehement, very intense connection to like the landing party, right? So now we're way down the line, and I just keep bringing this up now because of the populace of Israel and what I've been seeing. We've been seeing defections actually, like that. I've been seeing defections of people from the IDF. And in fact, I didn't play it, but I saw this woman, I might play her video, where she's just talking about former IDF person. This shit doesn't happen, right? So again, not everybody's in lockstep here, right? Not everybody is in lockstep. So you can kind of see this too in a lot of ways with Neptune in the natal chart and the square to Venus. Over time, the sort of the through line with this sort of fervent, and I think of Cancer as being kind of nationalistic, and this connection, with the new land. We're settling in this new land, and we have this new country in 1948. But with square with Neptune over time, that kind of connection, through that Cancerian attachment, to the philosophical ideals of the beginning of a state would fade with Neptune. Over time, it would fade. And there could even be some degree of moral or even religious degradation and corruption, right? Like for a place that is as supposedly holy, with the three faiths, and, a very high degree of what's the word I'm looking for? Piety coming from the Orthodox Jewish side. They have one of the largest fucking, gay pride parades on the planet, right? It's huge. So I think Israel might be one of the gayest countries in the world. It's weird in that way. When you get into that, you're also getting into Gemini, right? Mercury and Gemini. But to me, when I see Mercury and Gemini, to me, this is like the Mossad. It's the Mossad. It's like, shh, we're carrying out things here. We're carrying out things here. You don't know what's going on. That to me is Mercury and Gemini. In terms of what's going on with the country in general, we've already just gone through that Mars conjunction, which relates to what happened on Saturday morning. Also they have Jupiter here in Sagittarius at 27, which in a lot of ways gives them a sense of righteousness, right? Like they have this kind of righteous cause to, be in this land and be in this place. But with the opposition with Venus, that's interesting. And also the Iranian opposition, I don't think it allows them to settle easily, right? They've been there since 1948 and they're still going through these things. To me, that is Uranus, Jupiter. It's unsettling. There's always something, kind of explosive happening. But a very strong 10th house, very proud 10th house. We've talked about this before with Moon and Pluto, like super intense. Saturn in the 10th, right? Leo. I mean, I think that they picked this time. I think they picked this time for this chart. I think they knew what was going on. And even Mars conjunct Regulus, that's a big part of it. It's like, their will, their expression, their force, their might in Leo conjunct the star that regulates everything with all the other stars. It's one of the stars that plays into the story of the King of Kings, right? And when you have the King of Kings, Jesus' birthday on 9/11, like minus 33 BC, you have Jupiter conjunct Regulus. Isn't that interesting? Jupiter's conjunct Regulus. Here on this day, Mars is conjunct Regulus. It's a little bit of a different iteration of that story, isn't it? But even the trine with Jupiter, though, there's a self-righteousness here. There is a very powerful self-righteousness. And the square to the sun and the square to Chiron, they'll make enemies and they don't mind. The other thing, that's Trump's Mars. Trump should just go to Israel and be the head of Israel. He's got a better chart there. Like that's his ascendant. There's his Mars. They're close in age too, right? Trump was born in 47 and we have Israel in 48. So you're going to have Uranus in Gemini, but Trump does not have Mercury in Gemini. He has Mercury in Cancer. So there we go. This is the Israeli chart. And what I really wanted to point out was Mars, very close to the conjunction, which is when all this went off. But we're not done here. We're not done at all. To me, this Uranus conjunction, which goes right into that T square, the square with Chiron, the square with Mars. Yeah, and you bring it back to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the lovely. Look, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are now in biblical territory, right? We are in biblical territory. Everything changed and there's no going back. There's absolutely no going back. They're not going to walk it back. Everybody fucks up every now and then. They fuck up every now and then. Come on, just give us our hostages back. Let's hug it out. That's not going to happen. Ordo ab chao, right? Out of chaos order. So why don't we do this? I'm going to bring something up here. And this is what I found. This is all the oddities around the attack, right? So now we're getting back into the Neptune-Mercury opposition and the fog of war, right? Questions that immediately need to be asked about all of this. So let's get into it. Analysis by pro-Russian TG channel Military Chronicle. What oddities accompany the Hamas attack in Israel? Each circumstance is important both individually and as part of a complex of issues related to the Israeli security system. Oddity 1, Israel did not know about the preparations of the attack. Israel is the most wired fucking country in the world. Wired. If a cockroach approaches a base, they know. Gaza is a narrow piece of land with an area of 365 square meters, kilometer. It was believed that it was bugged and monitored far and wide by the Israeli army. That's what I'm talking about. And intelligence services. But during the attack, it turned out that this was not the case. Presumably, Hamas developed a system for coordination and communication that excluded electronic contacts. And somehow, the Palestinians managed to hide everything from Israeli intelligence. Really? One of the most sophisticated fucking intelligence agencies on the planet, and they hid everything? All right, let's keep going. Oddity number 2, Israel was unable to prevent the attack. Shortly before the attack on checkpoints in major cities on October 7th, Hamas organizedly deployed MLRS ground forces, paragliders, and other equipment to positions. The preparations and first steps went unnoticed. The preemptive strike was not launched. Oddity number 3, the alarm system at the border did not work. The electronic systems at the border, which Israel had invested billions of dollars, in building and equipping, were rendered useless. Numerous cameras and sensors also did not help detect and stop the Palestinian attack, as well as combat patrols, which for some reason simply were not nearby. Palestinian drones were able to easily hit automatic machine guns and sensor towers, and Hamas assault teams calmly blew up the fence and crossed the border. Nobody's trying to attack them. Due to the failure of the alarm, hundreds of IDF soldiers were killed in camps, in the barracks. Well, so I've seen some of those pictures. Pretty graphic. I mean, again, we're dealing with, not just the fog of war, but the theater of war. And on the surface, they look pretty graphic. Contrary to popular belief, the Palestinians did not bypass IDF fortification and bases. They aggressively stormed both checkpoints and bases where armored vehicles were located. At the same time, Hamas stopped using tanks, apparently due to the low qualifications of the attackers or lack of need. It is unclear where the sentries, security guards, and duty and forces were located. They vacated. They weren't there. There was nobody there. It's kind of like a January 6th environment. Hey, come on in. The Israeli Merkava Mk4 tank, destroyed by a copter drop, was hit in one of the most unprotected areas from above. At the same time, the trophy active protection complex was apparently disabled. The footage of the destruction of the tank and the capture of the crew clearly shows the vehicle's gun is covered. This suggests that the crew did not prepare the vehicle for battle and was counting only on intimidation, which is not only a gross violation of the instructions, but also simply stupid in such an attack. Who does this? Not these guys. They're way too smart for this. Oddity number 6, panic in border cities. All communities where it comes to a region like the Gaza Strip must have plans in place in the event of an escalation of conflict. However, no organized warning or evacuation was carried out. Local security forces turned out to be so few in number and poorly armed that they were quickly eliminated by the Palestinians. Oddity number 7, the difference in coordination between the IDF and Hamas. Until approximately noon on October 7th, the Israeli government showed virtually no response to the fighting. In the country, it is Saturday morning, Shabbat, only 14 to 15 hours did the security forces begin to gather reservists and organize retaliatory raids. However, the death of the commander of the Nahal Infantry Brigade, Jonathan Steinberg, I think his name is Nahal. Anyway, there's your martyr right there, Jonathan Steinberg, indicates a hasty reaction with the forces that were somehow able to be assembled immediately. Apparently, Nahal's intervention, that's his name, Nahal, in the battles against Hamas was initiated by the brigade commander. It was not the direct result direct order from the general staff. At the same time, in the next 2 days, the IDF will presumably begin a military operation inside the neighborhoods of Gaza Strip. However, actions in open areas and residential areas are different. An attempt by Israeli ground forces to enter Palestinian enclave will almost be accompanied by a large death toll on both sides. So these are all really important questions to ask. Like, how did all this happen? One of the most sophisticated armies and intelligence agencies were woefully unprepared. You just don't expect that. Oil just jumped over 4%. It's going to go up. You can count on that. Apparently, there's some Americans that are being held hostage by Hamas, which means that we'll be drawn into this. Number of Americans. There was a rave happening, a peace rave. Maybe the Americans were at the peace rave. Let me see if I can find this one. Yeah, Kylie Jenner had to delete her Instagram support of Israel. That's interesting. Here's an interesting comment. The Israeli war has given the U.S. their get out of jail free card. Ukraine is now a European problem. Could be. Let's see. Let me see if I can find this. And then we're going to come back. We're going to look at the chart of the moment, and we're going to look at this eclipse. And I have some interesting insight into this eclipse. All right, so I'm going to put this up. And this woman supposedly worked for the IDF, or worked 25 years ago, intelligence forces. And this is an interesting video. Let me play this for you. And she asked the same questions that I'm asking. And we can just bring this back to Neptune, right? That Neptune opposition with Mercury. And this whole idea of the fog of war. And that we really, really don't often know what's going on. All right, here we go.
October 7th, 2023. This is a flat fanning zone, and I'm here to share an update from Israel-Hamas war, which started this morning. I'm going to share some key details and concerns, mostly based on Israeli citizens' voices from the ground and based on official statements. This is a very tough day for me and for us in Israel, and it is tough for people of Palestine too, especially now that Israel is starting to attack back. This war and every war is a horrible thing for everyone involved, except for those who get rich from it, right? This morning, around 6 a.m., around sunrise, hundreds of Hamas terrorists, at least 300, breached the border fence in multiple places, completely unimpeded, leading to terror attacks and kidnappings in Israeli towns or villages. The terrorists infiltrated a significant number of dry land outposts, as well as a naval infiltration point in Zikim. As we speak, Israel is actively engaged in combat in 22 outposts. This is from the IDF statement, the official statement. The attacks have already resulted in over 100 casualties and more than 100 kidnaps of Israeli citizens. In one village, 50 Israelis have been taken hostage, leaving people locked in shelters for long periods of 8 to 9 hours without rescue. By the way, the 100 kidnappings is not the official number. It's what we hear from people on the ground. I think official numbers talk about 30 or 40 people, but we know there are more. In some places, the terrorists were burning the village, and people didn't know if to leave the shelter and surrender or stay and pray for the fire to not reach them. Many young people who were in a big outdoor party near the Gaza envelope villages were attacked there. Some ran away, some were injured, and some are still missing. Apparently, Israeli defense forces that were supposed to be around Gaza were placed around the West Bank because of security concerns, so that the Gaza envelope was left unoccupied with military. They say around 60 to 80% of that area was left without the IDF forces that were supposed to be there. Soldiers are being recruited for reserves as we speak from this morning, but because of stupid reasons such as no public transport, they're waiting hours to get to the bases. Mainstream media, this is an interesting point, apparently admits that IDF spokesperson is forbidding them to tell the complete truth about what's happening, highlighting a lack of transparency. And this is to the Israeli citizens. I'm not even talking about overseas. I'm talking about to the people of Israel here. For hours and hours, the reports that came from the mainstream media were completely lacking, and people started to rely mostly on the news from each other, from people on the ground. Only now, 6 p.m. Israel time, or it's actually 7 already, 12 hours after the event started, we received the first formal statement from the IDF spokesperson, and I will include an article with that statement in the notes. A year ago, there was a military operation in Gaza to prepare for such events, and ongoingly, there are trainings for these kind of scenarios. This raises serious questions for me, anyway, about Israeli intelligence. What happened? 2 years ago, there was a successful deployment of underground barriers with sensors to alert exactly on these kind of terrorist breaches. Israel has one of the most advanced and high-tech armies. How come there was zero response to the border and fence breaching? I cannot understand that. Personally, I served in the IDF 25 years ago in the intelligence forces. There's no way, in my view, that Israel did not know of what's coming. A cat moving alongside the fence is triggering all forces. So this? What happened to the strongest army in the world? How come border crossings were wide open? Something is very wrong here. Something is very strange. This chain of events is very unusual and not typical for the Israeli defense system. With the recent normalization efforts of Israel and Palestine led by Saudi Arabia, I wonder whether a prisoners exchange deal is something that could only be seriously considered by Israel if a shocking event like that happened. Is it a possibility that only with Israel hostages it can be justified to release dangerous prisoners from Israeli prisons? I don't know. Mainstream media reported that Deputy Hamas leader Salah al-Aruri suggests using Israeli prisoners for leverage in negotiations. So maybe. A point about the situation in Israel in the past few years, which I want to make, is related to, and those who follow me know that there's a general sense of insecurity in Israel. There's political and social instability and unrest. Public funds are being misused on agendas such as COVID, climate, judicial reform, abolishing cash, and many more. The current government is highly corrupt, in my view, while the previous one was no better. I don't care about having a popular opinion. I care about exposing evil forces wherever and whomever they are. So to me, this surprise attack seems like a planned operation on all fronts. This is a failure to protect the people of Israel, for sure. Perhaps the biggest failure since the Yom Kippur War exactly 50 years ago, if not bigger. By the way, is it a coincidence? It's exactly 50 years ago, almost on the day. The Yom Kippur War was on October 6, 1973. If I was a conspiracy theorist, I would say that this feels like the work of the deep state. It feels like the people of Israel and the people of Palestine have been sold once again to the higher powers that be. At the same time, this is still very, very difficult to fathom. Have a good evening.
So there you go. Right from the gal's mouth, right? Like when you put up everything that we had, that checklist, and she used to work for the IDF, like she understands intelligence, security, and where was it? Again, astrologically, Neptune Mercury opposition. The other side too is that South Node conjunct Mars, which again is almost like leaving the door open. From the past, from the present to the past we go, because I do have the chart for the Yom Kippur battle, time and everything. (1973), almost 50 years ago. Again, 6:30 a.m., almost at dawn. There's the sun, not quite in the first house, 12th house. Libra rising, and we can see the South Node conjuncting Pluto. So echoes of the past, something happening, disruptive, explosive, an echo from the past. To me, this is interesting, right? We have some of the similar elements. Well, Mercury here is in Scorpio, and it's much more out in the open, right? And we have the squares with the moon and Jupiter, which I think play out a little bit later. There's like a weird backstory that there was some peace negotiation that was settled and never really happened. It's a whole kind of backstory with the Yom Kippur War. But clearly, Mercury's out here. You kind of know what's going on. What happens afterwards is quite different. Saturn is in Cancer, right? So we have, it's not quite exactly opposite, but the moon was at 20 Cancer 2 nights ago, right? Or yesterday morning. And then we have this kind of transverse operation where Saturn, which is in many ways the opposite planet of the moon, and here we have another inconjunct, right? And the moon is in the opposite sign. So that's to me, this is fascinating. Actually, I think I take that back. The moon is in Aquarius, but Saturn's in the opposite sign. So that's where we get into the inconjunct. It's interesting. And then that South Node conjunct Saturn, I think, is about dominance, right? They're asserting dominance during this war. And really the Yom Kippur War, in a lot of ways, changed some of the geography in that area, right? And then, 50 years ago, you got to bring Chiron in. So we're Chiron returning it. So here's Chiron right here, 17. 50 years ago, Chiron was at 18. So it's the Chiron return of the war. This is what happens when you go into these Chiron return cycles. As we're about to go into a Chiron return cycle for this country, I think we can kind of see where that is going. Again, this is a chart that's marked by some yods. The yod to Mars and the yod to Saturn. Some squares, but it does not have the same levels of complexity, right, that the other chart has. Does not. Absolutely doesn't. And even with the moon and Jupiter on this day, it didn't last very long. But what we're seeing now and experiencing from a much more detached position, I think will last longer. I don't think they're going to sweep this thing under the rug. Which brings us into the eclipse. And the eclipse, we're now kind of in that eclipse phase, right? We're in the eclipse phase now. And, we're going to have an event here in Kerrville and we're gonna stream from some of it, certainly on Friday and hopefully on Saturday. I'm trying to hook that up, but we're in this thing now, and this eclipse is gonna come right over this area, and then it's gonna come back again in April, right through the same area. And of the two, if we could talk about an eclipse to be maybe positive or revelatory, this one in October, I think, is a bit more positive and revelatory. The one in April, I think, is very intense and quite harsh. And whatever you believe around what's happened in Israel, right? Whatever you believe in terms of whether it's the the centuries-long grudge match or whatever, or the godless heathens versus the chosen people, or this being a false flag-like operation, whatever you believe, what's happening is we're witnessing a group of people who have broken through the barriers of quote unquote civilization and security. It's a symbol, right? And I believe it's a symbol for what's coming. And I'm just going to be straight up with you. I don't get a great feeling from it, right? We talked about it last week, and we talked about this whole possibility of being born and coming through this very kind of bloody, this bloody shoot, right? I think that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is we're going to deal with these increasingly chaotic global energies. Like, I could see the world being so on fire that there would be calamity and chaos, across the planet, not just in one place, but calamity and chaos across the entire planet, like unlike anything we've ever seen before. And we're very close to that, and the pumps have been primed for all of this. And primed in Europe and primed in the United States. We have, I don't know how many millions of people we've taken in the past year, and they either have a vendetta against the United States, or they'll get here and they'll be dropped off somewhere and they won't be able to make their ends meet, and you'll have an angry hornet's nest. We've already seen what's happened in Europe, right? And so this is an ongoing problem, ongoing crisis, which has been synthetically driven, by the way. And now we have the eclipse coming, right? And I went through a history of eclipses in the United States, and I have never seen anything quite like these three eclipses. The one in 2017, this one next week, and the one in April of next year. I've never seen. I went through the historical record of the eclipses. It's not there. The closest is the eclipse of 1865. And it was on October 14th, I think. That is the closest. And that shows us coming out of the Civil War period, but still with some chaos involved. Let me show you the list of eclipses. And some of the eclipses are more visible in certain states than others. So you can see them: 1806, 2012, 2023, October 14th, right there. Anchorage, it goes all the way back to 1149. So where are the October and April dates? Atlanta, you'll see that October 23rd, 1623. And then there's that one on October 19th, 1865. You don't really see, here's an April 19th annular in Austin, 1608. Like, who the fuck is here? It's not even Austin. I think it's Austin's original name was Waterloo. I don't think anybody's even there, right? 1651. Maybe. What else do we have? From Austin to Boston. April 14th, 20. So we have, look, just go through these. This October 19th, 1865 is about as close as it gets. October 23rd, 1623. April 18th, 1558 in Chicago. I mean, you know, what do you got? You got a bunch of Tartarians hanging out there. See what I mean? Like, we're just in uncharted territory. And to get back into another Aries eclipse, you got to go to the year 2154. 2154. It's a long ass time, right? There we go. Dallas, April 8th. The next October eclipse, the annular eclipse that's coming up here next week or this week in Dallas, 2238. So these eclipses are pretty rare. And this eclipse cycle that we're in now is incredibly rare. It's incredibly rare. So you are going to live through something and witness something that rarely happens. Just doesn't, you saw it, right? And it's like bang, bang. See if I can find this other. There we go. Yeah, I mean, there's even the National Park Service has eclipses that have been supposedly prominent eclipses. 1097, 1758, Rhode Island documented the first lunar eclipse by a European colonist. 1805, Lewis and Clark, January 14th, 15th. You got a Nat Turner eclipse, more Lewis and Clark. August 7th, 1869, July 29th, 1878. And these are all based on astronomical phenomena and some other social aspects. Total solar eclipse, 1900, 1918. They used this eclipse to test Albert Einstein's theory of relativity. Their observations and supported his conclusions as they became. So they used an eclipse to launch Einstein. That's fucking interesting, don't you think? So we have these eclipses. And these are the so-called important events that arise out of them. You're living through history. You're living through history in a way that very few people will be able to say in their lifetime, right? And there are eclipses that happen all over the world. But we've never seen or been through anything like this. And the last eclipse in 2017 absolutely sliced the country right in half. Right? So what is the upside of the eclipse? Can I tell you something positive about the eclipse? Well, I think what's interesting is that it also occurs with the Pluto return of the United States. That it's the end of a time, right? An end of a period of time. You know, I also feel like we're about to head into more 1776 territory. That's the bottom line, right? We're headed into a revolutionary period. And I'll talk more about that in, 2 weeks. And I'm going to talk about it at the event on Saturday. And it has to do with Uranus and where Uranus is headed in Gemini. Anyway, that's where we are, really. The chart of the week is a lot like what we just saw. We're in some very chaotic energy. It's really interesting. I was going through some stuff on the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And it was really interesting that I found this from the Forward, which was it's the Jewish independent nonprofit newspaper. I remember they used to advertise on KNBR a long time ago. Hamas is calling its attack the Al-Aqsa flood. Why is the Jerusalem mosque so important in Gaza? I thought that this terminology of the flood was interesting, particularly in reference to Neptune opposing Mercury, right? Like this whole kind of Neptunian energy of flood. You can call it swarm. Didn't call it what else would you use? An assault, but a flood. So this gets into why the Al-Aqsa is so inflammatory. This is all about the third temple, right here. Third temple. All right, we wanted to talk a little bit about Sheet, I think, because Neptune's upcoming conjunction with Sheet. So Sheet is a fixed star, and it is kind of in the Saturnian camp, right? So this is what Ptolemy says about Sheet. It is the nature of Mars and Mercury to Simonite of Saturn, to other authors of Saturn and Mercury, and to Alvidus of Neptune and square to Saturn or Mars. It causes extreme misfortune, murder, suicide, and drowning. Sheet at 28. Pisces, this star imparts to its native stubbornness. One can be headstrong, of a combative nature. This native gains loose friends, and acquaintances, may be unfortunate, of a changeable, almost unpredictable nature, has high enterprise and may be subject to violence, may become of a controversial nature, fantasizes. So Sheet is a pretty unfortunate star, and it's connected to danger, and it's formed of tidal waves or violent storms. So isn't it interesting that we have Neptune conjunct Sheet, and Hamas is calling their raid a flood, right? So in some ways, it's also a violent storm. Sheet, the shoulder of Pegasus, is a fixed star of the accentuated Saturnian character. Tied up with a malefic, this could lead to the native to lose his life in catastrophes such as floods, shipwrecks, mining incidents, airplane accidents, or maybe by suicide. In a mundane chart with transiting MC or ascendant in conjunction, an accident or a catastrophe may happen. So this is very, when you get into fixed stars, you get into exactly what they mean. They're fixed, right? They're not mutable or malleable in the sense that, well, over time, Sheet is Sheet. This is what Sheet is. Doesn't change. It's very interesting. Markov and Sheet are both Mars-Mercury stars. Both stars are true black malefics in traditional astrology, promising injury by one's hand or another's, and life imprisonment. Wow. Interesting. Huh. Very interesting. Sheet rules the center ball of the left foot, of course, it being Piscean at 28 Pisces, but also being connected to Saturn, which rules bones. So Sheet has a nasty reputation in astrology. There are plenty of examples of people with this star prominent expressing the positive manifestations of Sheet. So much depends on the whole chart. I guess there's a positive manifestation. So what do we have here? This is from the Astrology King, Jamie, not the Leo King. Let me just show you a few Sheet aspects here, or people that have Sheet. So we have, let's see, Descendant conjunct Sheet. Alexei Navalny, the guy that got poisoned, Bruce Willis, Rudy Giuliani, and Dave Chappelle. It's funny, we talked about Dave Chappelle earlier. Part of Fortune conjunct Sheet, Julian Assange, 0.05 conjunction, Rupert Murdoch, Rudolph Hess, Louis the 17th, and Bernadette Brady, and Sun conjunct Sheet. Look at this. You got Sirhan, who's Palestinian, by the way. You also have Mercury conjunct Sheet. Bruce Willis, James McGonigal, who I believe is remote viewer, Brian Mulroney, who is the Prime Minister of Canada, Earl Warren of the Warren Commission, Harvey Weinstein, 28 Pisces, Edgar Casey, look at that, conjunct Sheet, Ronaldinho and Michelangelo. Oh, this is a different McGonigal, an example of the importance considering the whole chart. James McGonigal, a goalie in Canada's Junior A Hockey League, tragically died in 2022, age 19. He crashed his car, danger through engines, and went through the windshield into the water, danger through water, liable to accidents and drowning. The tight square from watery Neptune and lunar nodes made this tough for James. Look at that. Moon conjunct Sheet, worry or loss. These are some people that have Moon conjunct Sheet. John Wayne Gacy, Richard Ramirez, Kim Kardashian, James Woods. Interesting. Very interesting. So I think Neptune's not quite there yet, right? But when it cranks up and gets back up to 28 Pisces, we're in for a sheet storm, apparently. And I do think it's interesting that Hamas called their assault a flood, right? Which is, again, in kind of sheet territory. Even though Neptune's retrograding, it's still in a fairly close orb. Anyway, somebody was asking about sheet last week in the conjunction with Neptune. So there you go. You ask and I listen. All right. 2 hours and 15 minutes. I think we're out of here. I think we're good. I think we're good. You know, what is my advice to everybody? Well, my advice is to stay in shape, right? Stay in shape, try and get some rest, because the energies right now are I think, pretty intense and draining. You know, we're going to start to go through this portal, and life's going to get really hard, right? It's going to get difficult. Gas prices are going to go up. Everything's going to go up, and now we're dealing with more of this That's what I'm looking for. Sort of random, radical energy, right? And we haven't even gotten to Uranus at 25 Taurus, where it conjuncts algal. No, like that's still in our future here, right? So I do think we're going to be okay on the other side of this. But the other side of this is like 3.5, 4 years away. The other side of this is like 2029, 2030. And we're just entering into this period now. We're just entering into this cycle. And the eclipses are the harbinger of the time that we're headed towards. So it's going to take, really strong, tough, resourceful people to get through this period. And you're going to need to know people that can be helpful, because not everybody is, in kind of individualistic and tough and resource. Not everybody's fucking Mel Gibson and Mad Max. Okay. But there are people who are hanging out in the little petroleum processing place, and they had each other, right? And they were able to keep the barbarians at the gate until, of course, Mad Max shows up. And then he actually helps them on their deliverance, right? Their trek to the promised land. So, moral story, get to know people. Get to know people and make good relations. And it was really, I think, in a lot of ways, healing and empowering to see that young woman from Israel talk so openly about the problems in her own country. Because I think it's, and I'm even guilty of this at times, right? It's just like, man, the country's really making life difficult for a lot of people, or just like a lot of people think the United States is making life difficult for a lot of people. And there are a lot of good people in the United States. And we just saw somebody in Israel with a fucking conscience, which is important and good. So keep that in mind as well. And I think as Pluto goes deeper into Aquarius, we'll have more of a sense of this, right? We'll have more of a sense of that we're in it together. And, it's the sociopathic clown show that we're having to deal with. And people are waking up. When COVID hit Israel, man, people were not happy. They were completely draconian, really draconian. And that set people off on kind of a different path with their own leadership. So this is what happens. Sometimes waking up is blissful and sometimes it's bloody, right? And you'll get a little bit of both. And I think right now, though, we're headed into a blood cycle. When I see, the blood, this bloody moon in Aries in conjunction with the Libra sun, or the bloody sun in Aries, conjuncting with, the Libra moon, right? Or the Aries sun, Aries moon. These are big times. These are big times. So anyway, there you go. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that's our show for this evening. Thank you for being here. And thanks for hanging out while I kind of woke up, was able to deliver. I hope you're able to get something out of it. And, my ultimate goal is to use astrology to kind of understand some events. And then hopefully through that understanding, you have more of a sense of empowerment, even if we're dealing with things that are not pretty. And I'm just, these are not pretty times. They are not pretty times. But you can get stronger and you can get better. And that's one of the things about Aries, because we're in an Aries time. And that's one of the things about Aries that can be very fruitful, is the accomplishment of the things that I was just talking about. Getting stronger, becoming more aware, getting better, right? Getting more refined. When I say refined, I'm not talking about refined in a sort of a classical Libran sense. Refined in terms of your approach and your attention. That's all very Aries-like. Cut out the waste. Be more economical. You do all that, right? And you have a puncher's chance to get through on the other side of this thing. because I think that's when it's going to get real interesting. And hopefully, what we've all been waiting for, right? Because the other stuff is starting to fall apart. The whole Klaus Schwab shit's falling apart. I'm telling you. They're going to try and push this thing across the finish line. They're not going to be able to do it. But it's not for want of trying or the extraction of funds. All right, use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'll be be back in the readings path after the event. And a lot of people have been really getting into relocation lately, which I'm quite good at. So if you're looking for a place to go, let me know. I can help you out there. All right, take care. Bye for now.